I, 33 male, met my wife, 31 female, 8 years ago on a dating app. At the time, neither of us was looking for anything serious. We were both young, and we wanted to make the best of our youth while we could. But then we fell for each other, and all of that went out the window. We wanted to be with each other all the time, and things quickly got serious. I knew before she and I even met that my wife was polyamorous. At the time, it wasn't something I cared much about. I just went into our relationship thinking it was going to be a casual, fun time. I was definitely curious about what that was and how that worked in her life, but personally, I've always been monogamous. My wife told me one day when things started to get serious that for the first time in years, she was only thinking about one person, and that was me. There was a bit of a disconnect between us when we first started exclusively dating because I felt like I was taking something away from her through monogamy. However, she assured me that it was what she wanted. We had some ups and downs, and we were able to work it out to be together. Eventually, I proposed to her, and we got married. Some of the people in my family were not at all understanding of polyamory, and they were practically betting that I would end up getting divorced. Before I was with my wife, I didn't know much about it, and I might have thought the same thing. But she explained everything to me in such a way that I understood what it was, and I trusted that should she ever have any issues with monogamy, that she would come to me and we could talk about them. About 3 years into our marriage, I got the opportunity of a lifetime for work. It required me to travel abroad for 3 months to do some on-site filming for an advertising agency. They were pretty much paying me to travel all over Asia and visit some of the best tourist sites and take pictures. All expenses paid, hotels, meals, airfare, everything you can think of. After a long discussion with my wife, we decided that it was too good of an opportunity to pass up, and I agreed to take it. Of course, that meant that she would be alone back home while I was away, except for 1 week when she would be meeting me in Tokyo since our schedules aligned. I said goodbye to her, and I set off on my grand adventure. I had a great time. Every night I would FaceTime with my wife, and we would catch up. I had no fears that anything was going to happen while I was away. One night, I called her for FaceTime around 5 p.m. While I was in Thailand, that was around 8 a.m. in our time zone. Our typical call schedule had been just like that. I would call her in the evening when I got finished with all of my things, and she was usually drinking coffee in the kitchen when I did. However, this time, she didn't answer. At first, I figured that she must have slept late or forgotten to set her alarm, but deep down I knew that was not like her at all. She had always been the kind of person to wake up at 7 a.m. on the dot without even needing an alarm to do so. Still, I didn't suspect that she was with someone else. I just texted her and told her that I missed her and loved her, and I would give her a call the next morning since we would both be busy and or asleep. When I was finally able to get on the phone with her again, I asked her about what happened. It wasn't an accusatory question, it was more of curiosity since it just wasn't like her. She got defensive with her answer. She made it sound like I was insinuating something when I wasn't by any means. I ended the call before an argument started. That was the last thing I wanted while I was trying to enjoy myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her reaction that I didn't know about. Eventually, we made up, and everything was fine leading up to her visiting me in Tokyo. She got off the plane, and I was at the airport to pick her up. I was excited to see her. She was my wife, and I loved her, and I missed her. It had only been 2 weeks since I last saw her, but the first thing I wanted to do was just go back to the hotel room and be intimate with her. When we got there, she told me she wasn't in the mood because she was a little bit jet-lagged from the flight. I completely understood where she was coming from, so I didn't want to pressure her into doing anything, so we both just laid down and talked for a while. Throughout the rest of the week, every time I would try to initiate something with her, she would come up with a reason to reject it. Whenever she would end it, I wouldn't ask any questions or try to pressure her to give me answers about why she didn't want to sleep with me. It did strike me as odd because she has always been the type of person who was very eager to have intimacy. The Tokyo trip ended for her, and I still had 1 week left on my journey. It flew by, and I couldn't wait to get home because I could feel that there was some distance growing between my wife and me. Everything seemed normal when I got there, but she still wasn't wanting to sleep with me. After the first couple of days I was back, she started staying late at work, and it honestly felt like she was actively avoiding me. At that point, I had let a lot of my insecurities about what was going on with our relationship pile up, and I confronted her about it when she returned home. She told me that I was being obnoxious with my accusations. In fact, she ended up guilt-tripping me for why she was staying late at work. She told me it was because she had to take time off work to visit me in Tokyo, as I pressured her to do. We got into a huge argument about that, and I ended up sleeping on the couch. Just the following day, which happened to be a Saturday, she told me she had to go to work for some last-minute troubleshooting at the office. In all the time we had been together, she had never worked a Saturday. I think it was at that point that I really thought something was going on. All the time that we had been together, we had never had any issues with her polyamory. But as soon as I started to think that something was wrong, it popped its head right up. I couldn't help but wonder if she had taken advantage of the time that I was gone and slept with another person. For a while, I convinced myself that I was just exaggerating and purposefully trying to hurt my feelings by thinking things like that. I distracted myself by trying to clean up some of the house. As I was looking under our bed to pull out any old clothes or trash, etc., I found a sock. It was only one sock, but it wasn't mine, I knew that, and it wasn't the type of sock that my wife wore. It was someone else's sock who didn't live in my house. That was the push that I needed to seriously consider that my wife was in fact cheating on me. I went to her office and looked through her desktop to see if there were any indications of who it was with or what she was doing while she was supposedly at work. There was no indication from any of her recent emails that she needed to go into the office for any reason, so that helped me realize that she had already lied to me. Her inbox seemed clean, but when I looked over her desktop and clicked on her recycle bin, I found some pictures and videos that she had deleted but hadn't cleared. My heart completely sank when I saw that. I recognized the man in the pictures right away. He was one of her coworkers. I had met him a few times at company gatherings, and I always thought he was a bit chummy with my wife. I would make jokes about it with her, and she would just laugh it off with me and tell me that he was married too, so I had nothing to worry about. I guess they both saw a prime opportunity to cheat on their partners while I was out of town. I emailed myself the evidence and immediately began looking for a divorce attorney. Right away, I started thinking of a way to get back at both of them for their betrayal. Knowing that my wife was cheating on me with one thing, but the fact that she was cheating on me with a married man and ruining 2 relationships knowingly was like a slap in the face. I looked her coworker up on social media and found his wife pretty easily. I sent her a message asking if we could set up a time to speak face-to-face since I had some news to share about her husband. She probably assumed the worst right away, but she agreed to meet me at a cafe. I saw her world crumbling when I told her, and I felt terrible. I felt the exact same way. I didn't want to let either of them just get away with their affair when they ruined both of our lives. I needed to come up with some way to get back at them. I spent the next few weeks pretending like everything was all right with my wife, and I encouraged the partner of her coworker to do the same. We both planned on leaving our spouses, but we wanted to get everything in order first. Both of us were going to surprise them with our divorce papers on the same day, so neither of them would have time to prepare. When everything was done, I brought my wife out to a lovely restaurant. She thought I was surprising her with a nice date. Toward the end of the meal, she asked me what prompted the gesture, so I figured I might as well tell her. I pulled out the papers and slid them across the table to her. She was shocked and hysterical. She tried to contain herself, but really it was quite the scene. Other diners were watching us while she started crying. I explained why and told her I saw the pictures and I wasn't going to be with a cheater. She tried to tell me I was misinterpreting them and that she hadn't cheated, but I didn't believe it. I just left the restaurant, leaving her to pick up the bill. We got divorced and now we're living separately and have no contact with each other at all. Funnily enough, her coworker's wife actually messaged me one day and asked to get together. We kind of hit it off. Things are still complicated because the wounds are so fresh, but there could be something there. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. It isn't unheard of for a polyamorous person to agree to monogamy when they fall for a certain person, but not everyone adjusts to that lifestyle. If she was so quick to take advantage of the opportunity when you were out of town, it makes me wonder if it was the first time or not. You did the right thing by telling the affair partner's spouse. She had the right to know that her husband was cheating as well. I'm glad you feel like you're building another connection with someone, but I would be careful not to jump into something else so fast, especially with someone who just went through the same thing. You could form some kind of trauma bond, and that would be toxic. Now, let's move on to our next story. When I, 27 male, met my fiancée, 25 female, 4 years ago, I knew right away that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She was everything that I had been looking for. We'd only been dating for a year when I proposed. We've been engaged for 3 years. The long engagement has caused some trouble for us. One of the biggest issues is that she wanted to plan her dream wedding, which subsequently would cost us quite a bit of money. I've never been one to care about superficial things like that. I would be more than happy going to the courthouse, signing some papers, then spending all of the wedding money on our honeymoon. However, she had always dreamt of her big day, and she wanted a big wedding with no compromise. It felt like every other week the budget we set aside for the wedding had increased, or she was telling me that she had gone over and was apologizing for it. At some point, I noticed that her apologies were meaningless because she continued to go over. We were getting into a lot of arguments, and there was a bit of resentment brewing between us. I'd had enough of her constant disregard for the financial constraints of the wedding, so I sat her down intending to have a calm, reasonable conversation with her. She was immediately very defensive and told me that she wasn't sure if she could be with someone who was controlling. I was upset that she had accused me of being controlling when all I was doing was standing up for myself when she was taking advantage of me. After the fight, she ended up leaving and staying at her friend's house for a week while we figured things out. Honestly, I thought it might have been the end for us. I was heartbroken. She was my dream girl, and I cared so much about her. She eventually came back, and we had a long discussion about the wedding. We both agreed that we still wanted to be together, but we needed to set some boundaries. We also agreed that we would move forward with what we had for the wedding and halt all further planning. That was the only compromise on the issue I would allow, since we were already over budget by 50% and had 150 people invited. We fell back into our old patterns with each other, and it seemed like our temporary break and discussion actually helped our relationship. The wedding was only a few months away, and we were doing well. As we got closer to the wedding date, some of the stressors started to come back for us. My fiancée's coping mechanism with the stress was to throw herself into her work. She's a graphic designer and very creatively inclined, so it helped alleviate the stress. So instead of being home with me, she was at work. She started spending more and more time at work. It felt avoidant, which was unlike her. I was curious about why she was there so much, so I asked her one night when she came home. She just told me that it was a good way to escape and forget about all of it. I didn't understand why she still wanted to go through with the huge wedding if it was stressing her out so much, but I didn't ask about that. Around the same time, I noticed that she was wearing more makeup and more revealing clothes to work. I had nothing against her dressing in a way that she felt confident, but she normally wore long pants, boots, and sweaters to work because she was always complaining about how cold she was while she was there. Suddenly, she was wearing sleeveless blouses showing cleavage and skirts. It was odd. I tried not to worry about it, but honestly, I've seen a ton of those "Am I the Jerk" videos and stories exposing cheaters, so a lot of the things she was doing were raising red flags for me. I needed to find out if something was going on before the wedding. I didn't want to be married to her and then find out she was with an ex or something after we were legally attached. I did some snooping on my own, but didn't find anything. One thing I've always known about liars is that they're good at hiding their lies, so I justified hiring a private investigator to follow her. I reached out to someone who specializes in infidelity, and they agreed to take the case. I could only afford to pay them for a few days because the wedding was depleting a lot of my savings. The first day, they didn't find anything. She went to work and went home with no issue. I thought that maybe I was overreacting, but my gut told me not to call the private investigator off. The next day, I was glad I trusted my gut. My fiancée texted me about midway through the day that she would be staying late at the office. She said that she was helping a coworker with some excess work they had before a due date. However, the evidence the private investigator brought back to me told a different story. They emailed me over a file with videos and pictures of my girlfriend with her boss in his office. They were having sex right on his desk, while other employees were in the office. I just remember staring at the computer screen until it turned itself off. I was so shocked by what I saw. When I collected myself, I started to think about my options. There was absolutely no chance I was going through with the wedding, but I needed to figure out how it ended. I wanted a little revenge on her for cheating on me. An idea hit me, so before I acted on it, I packed up some of my stuff and texted my brother to see if I could stay with him. When I got to his house, I drafted an email to our entire wedding guest list. In the email, I told them all it was canceled and attached the evidence of my fee on Say's affair. Surprisingly, I got several responses back from relatives, coworkers, and friends about it. What surprised me the most, which I didn't even realize at the time, was that my fiancé's HR manager was on the list. She reached out to me and asked about details because it was something she was obligated to act on because it was clearly on company property. I told her everything I knew. My fiancé figured out I was with my brother and came to his house, banging on the door. She was fuming at me, but I stood my ground and ended it. I told her I was contacting the venue, vendors, and everyone else involved in the wedding and having all of my money refunded to me. I felt bad when she was crying in front of me, but then I remembered how she cheated on me, and I didn't anymore. She and her boss were both fired for their inappropriate relations on the job. She tried to call me and tell me that I was still obligated to pay for the apartment, even though I didn't live there, but I managed to work something out with the apartment complex to pay for 1 month and get off the lease. I think they were just willing to work with me because of the situation. My now ex-fiancée was forced to move out because she lost her job and couldn't afford rent on her own because she dumped what little she had in savings into a wedding that never happened. OP, I'm sorry you had to go through something like that. It sounds like your ex was manipulating you from the start when she wasn't respecting your budget for the wedding. I'm not saying you were wrong for following your heart and proposing so early, but it's usually best to spend some time with someone before proposing to avoid situations like that. People tend to hide the less desirable qualities of themselves early on. I'm glad you were able to get out of the relationship and your lease so you didn't end up marrying her. You saved yourself a lot of stress by avoiding the inevitable divorce. I wish you the best moving forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.